Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors meeting for October 6, 2015. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Avalos? Avalos present. President Breed?
Here.
Breed present. Supervisor Campos?
Present.
Campos present. Supervisor Christensen?
Here.
Christensen present. Supervisor Cohen? Cohen not present. Supervisor Farrell?
Present.
Farrell present. Supervisor Kim? Kim not present. Supervisor Marr? Marr present. Supervisor Tang?
Present.
Tang present. Supervisor Wiener?
Present.
Wiener present. Supervisor Yee?
Present.
Yee present. Supervisor Cohen?
Present.
Cohen present. Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Can you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
I pledge to the flag
of the United States of
America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one
one nation under God,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for
all.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any communications?
There are none to report today, Madam President.
Okay. Colleagues, would anyone like to sever any items from the consent agenda? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll on items on the consent agenda?
On items 1 through 14, Supervisor Marr. Aye. Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener?
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos? Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos?
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen? Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen? Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell?
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, absent. There are 10 ayes.
These items are finally passed unanimously. Madam Clerk, can you please call items 15 through 28 together?
Items 15 through 28 are the resolutions to authorize the execution and delivery of multifamily housing revenue notes in the following not-to-exceed aggregate principal amounts and for the purposes of providing financing for the acquisition and rehabilitation of the following projects. Item 15 is for $16.2 million for a 75-unit housing project at 491 31st Avenue. Item 16 for $18 million for a 69-unit housing project at 345 Arguello Boulevard. Item 17 is for $38.6 million, a 92-unit housing project located at 990 Pacific Avenue. For item 18, $22.2 million for a 99-unit housing project at 666 Ellis Street. Item 19 for $48.8 million for 201-unit housing project at 1150 Scott Street, a.k.a. Robert B. Pitts. Item 20 for $21.5 million for a 113-unit housing project located at 1880 Pine Street. Item 21 for $30.7 million for a 109-unit housing project located at 255 Woodside Avenue. Item 22 for $39.9 million for a 118-unit housing project known as Holly Courts located at 100 Appleton Street. Item 23 is for $13.3 million for a 62-unit housing project located at 939 and 951 Eddy Street. Item 24 is for $69.2 million for a 213-unit housing project located at 1065 Oakdale Avenue and 798 Gerald Avenue, also known as Hunters Point East-West. For item 25, for a $25.6 million 90-unit housing project located at 25 Sanchez Street. For item 26 is a $19.5 million 42-unit housing project located at 462 DuBose Avenue. Item 27 is for $21.8 million an 89-unit housing project located at 430 Turk Street. And for item 28, a $14.3 million 50-unit housing project located at 227 Bay Street.
Okay, roll call vote.
On items 15 through 28, Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. There are 11 ayes.
These resolutions are adopted unanimously. Okay, Madam Clerk, can you go to the next item, please?
Item 29 is a resolution to approve a second amendment to a lease between the city and Proxy Development for property at the northeast corner of Octavia Boulevard and Fell Street to extend the lease term through January 31st, 2021, and revise the monthly base rent effective November 1st, 2015.
Same house, same call. Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. Item 30, please.
Item 30 is a resolution to approve and authorize the termination of the lease disposition and development agreement for the rehabilitation and lease of the Geneva Office Building and Powerhouse with the Friends of the Geneva Office Building and Powerhouse.
Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you. Colleagues, this resolution reflects changes to the plans for the Geneva Office Building and Powerhouse. This has been a project that has been starting and stopping for a number of years, ever since the land was transferred from the MTA to the Rec and Park Department back in around 2000. Overall, the building needs $26 million or so to rehabilitate and to make it functional for community use. The plans are to actually have community space and arts programming and arts education programming at the site. But it's been running into a lot of difficulty around how to raise those kind of dollars. But I want to, this new life for the office building is really part of the effort of my office, and I want to thank Beth Rubenstein for all of her work rounding up a lot of support within City Hall to make it happen. Also want to recognize Nicole Averill from the Rec and Park Department as well, who has been instrumental in helping to keep this project going forward. Amy Cohen from the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, Joaquin Torres, and Tom DeCaney as well. The new plan is going to be a phased-in approach. We'll be using park bond money from the last park bond that was approved in 2012, and there's funds that could be available there for just doing the Powerhouse side of the Geneva Office Building and Powerhouse. And later, once we've demonstrated that we can renovate and build and program there, that we can actually go to the second phase moving forward. So this resolution will be continuing with the effort of Aitlin Darling Design, but also to dispose of the lease disposition and development agreement that was approved here about a year and a half ago. And really, it's to really make sure that we can move forward with the new version of how this building will get built and be of great service, not just to District 11, but to the entire city and county of San Francisco. And I urge your support, colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, can we take this item? Same house, same call. Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. Item 31.
Item 31 is a resolution to retroactively authorize the Department of Public Health to accept and expend a $524,000 grant from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to participate in a medical monitoring project for the period of June 1st, 2015 through May 31st, 2016.
Same house, same call. Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. Item 32.
Item 32 is a resolution to authorize the Department of Public Health to submit an application for calendar year 2016 to continue to receive funding, $6.2 million, for the Comprehensive HIV Prevention Programs Grant from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention from January 1st through December 31st, 2016.
Same house, same call. Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. Item 33, please.
Item 33 is a resolution to retroactively authorize the Juvenile Probation Department to accept and expend a $17,000 grant from the Board of State and Community Corrections for evidence-based practices training, May 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2016.
Same house, same call. Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. Next item, please.
Item 34, resolution to retroactively authorize the Office of the District Attorney to accept a gift of a one-year software subscription service valued at $37,800 from Salesforce for the period of July 14th, 2015 through July 13th, 2016.
Same house, same call. Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. Item 35.
Item 35 is a resolution to approve a freeway operations and maintenance agreement with the State of California, apportioning maintenance responsibilities for Highway 101, Van Ness Avenue corridor, and to authorize the Director of Public Works to execute the agreement on behalf of the city.
Same House, same call. Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. And colleagues, can I entertain a motion to Okay, can we go to committee reports, please?
Items 40 through 42 were considered by the Government Audit and Oversight Committee at a regular meeting on Thursday, October 1st. These were forwarded as committee reports. Item 40 is a resolution to respond to the presiding judge of the Superior Court on the findings and recommendations contained in the 2014-15 Civil Grand Jury Report entitled Clean Power at Long Last.
Okay, colleagues, can we take these items, same House, same call? Without objections, the resolution is adopted and...
Madam President, my apologies. I only read item 40. I can read item 41 as well. Okay. And item 41 is a resolution to respond to the presiding judge of the Superior Court on the findings and recommendations contained in the 2014 through 15 Civil Grand Jury Report entitled San Francisco City Construction Programs, It Needs Work, and to urge the mayor to cause the implementation of accepted findings and recommendations through his department heads and through the development of the annual budget.
Same House, same call. Without objection, these resolutions are adopted unanimously. Item 42.
Item 42 is an ordinance to amend the administrative code to reflect changes in job classifications and bargaining units.
Same House, same call. Without objection, the ordinance is passed unanimously on the first reading. Supervisor Kim.
President Breed, I'd like to make a motion to rescind the vote on the consent calendar, items 1 through 14. Consent agenda.
Supervisor Kim has made a motion, seconded by Supervisor Yee. Colleagues, can we take this without objection? Without objection, the motion to rescind passes unanimously. And colleagues, can we take the consent agenda, same House, same call? Or, Madam Clerk, do you need to call the roll on that?
We should call the roll, Madam President.
Okay. Can you call the roll, please, on the consent agenda?
On items 1 through 14, Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. There are 11 ayes.
These items are passed and approved unanimously. Okay, moving right along. Madam Clerk, can we go to roll call for introductions?
Yes. Supervisor Marr, you're the first supervisor to introduce new business.
Thank you. Colleagues, I have a couple of items and two in memoriams. The first is thank you so much to the Richmond District YMCA, the Clement Street Merchants, and our office, and many residents of the Richmond for sponsoring the Movies in the Park nights. The last one for this season is coming up on Friday evening. It's the amazing Neil Gaiman's Coraline, the film Coraline from the graphic novel. The movies are shown in high definition on a 20-foot screen under the stars. It was beautiful a few weekends ago. Sometimes you need heavy blankets as the fog rolls in, but it's a wonderful way, almost like a drive-in theater with masses of people, families, and small business leaders with us. Come early with your blankets, your picnic basket, and warm layers to reserve your spot on the baseball field in Rossi Park near Arguello and Anza. Tickets are not necessary. It's totally free, and just come as early as possible. There's always lots of physical fitness activities by the Y and others. The movie starts at sunset, approximately 7 p.m., and we wanted to also thank Michael Bust and the Clement Street Merchants, Richmond District YMCA, Chrissy especially for the hard work, and the San Francisco Rec and Park Department. It's important to bring printed receipts to participating Clement Street Merchants to receive special promotions as well. If you want more information, go to clementstreetsf.com. That's clementstreetsf.com. And for future films, contact my office if you have suggestions. Also, a great family arts environment activity coming up on Saturday is the Leap Sandcastle contest. I'll be one of the judges this year, and I've been going out. It's pretty amazing what young people and schools and their advisors can do with sand, and some of the most amazing art, temporary art, on Ocean Beach near Kelly's Cove area at the foot of Balboa and the Great Highway near the Cliff House at the foot of the Cliff House. Teams from various businesses in the building industry partner with local schools to build the biggest and best sandcastle sculptures they can imagine. Sculptures are inspired by a set theme each year, and the theme for 2015 is Sand Cinema. There's some really good YouTube videos of the themes. All proceeds benefit LEAP, which helps bring educational programs to the Bay Area schools. Admission is free, and event is open to the public. It really is an amazing showing of creativity in the natural environment as well. The contest helps make it possible for LEAP to serve over 7,000 students in 2015 across 25 Bay Area schools with hands-on learning experiences in the arts. Teams and sponsors involved in the last year's 2014 Sandcastle contest, which we had to move dates around, I remember last year a little bit. They raised over $262,000. The goals for 2015 is to raise $300,000 and to help LEAP continue to expand its programs. Approximately 3,000 people attend the contest each year, so we're expecting a lot of people at Ocean Beach in the Richmond District this year. Please bring your families, your doggies, everyone. It's an amazing gathering of community and protecting the environment as well. 10:30 is when the Sandcastle building begins. The award ceremony is at 3:30, and the event ends at 4:30 when people start to dismantle the sandcastles, which is also a kind of a fun process as well. I have a couple of other announcements. An amazing revolutionary theater and puppet maker, Peter Schumann, is coming to the Internet Archive in the Richmond District. His Bread and Puppet Theater has been around giving vision and arts for the people and arts for social movements for decades. On Friday, October 9th, come to the Internet Archive, another unique institution trying to create free and accessible access to information through the Internet year-round, 24/7. On Friday, October 9th, come early to the Internet Archive for a wine reception and sale of the company's cheap art at 6 o'clock. Also at 7 p.m., we'll be dedicating the Bread and Puppet Archive with the Internet Archive founder Brewster Kyle, an amazing visionary leader, and filmmaker Dee Dee Halleck. We thank Dee Dee Halleck's generosity, and the Internet Archive is also preserving 150 hours of videos of circuses, pageants, passion plays, 250 puppeteers, and making it available to the whole public all year round, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then Peter Schumann will perform one of his famous fiddle talks, a once-in-a-lifetime chance to experience the philosophy of this amazing visionary artist. It's the first time he's coming back to San Francisco in a long time, and it leads up to a performance of the 60s anti-Vietnam War piece, Fire. Please join us, and thank you so much to the Internet Archive and Brewster Kyle and Dee Dee Halleck for bringing Peter Schumann and the Bread and Puppet Theater to San Francisco. Also, on a sad note, after the amazing Hardly Strictly Bluegrass Festival, arguably the most amazing and best free music festival in the world, I'm deeply saddened to announce the death of Audrey Carey, who was a 23-year-old young woman from a town near Montreal, Quebec. She tragically passed away while visiting our city during the festival. It's believed that she attended Hardly Strictly this past Friday evening and at some point was a victim of a blunt force trauma to her head. A passerby found her body in Golden Gate Park on Saturday morning. When officers and paramedics arrived, she was pronounced dead at the scene. And according to a family friend, Carrie was backpacking across the West Coast from her hometown outside of Montreal and was in San Francisco last week for an approximate 2-week trip. She was described by her family and friends as a, quote, hippie on the side and full of life, end quote. Police are currently treating this as a homicide case. If anyone has any information regarding this homicide, please give the police department anonymous tip line a call at 415-575-4444 or to text a tip to tip 411 with SFPD in the message. Condolences, deep condolences to Ms. Carey and her family. Also, colleagues, I'd like to end the meeting in honor of Audrey Carey, who was found deceased on Saturday. And I'd also like to ask if we could conclude the meeting in honor of an amazing leader, 100-year-old leader, Grace Lee Boggs from Detroit, Michigan. And I know Supervisor Kim, Supervisor Avalos, Supervisor Campos, and others of us met her, or you met her a couple of years ago as the Chinese Progressive Association and others honored her. I just wanted to say I met Grace about 20 years ago as Scott Kurashige, her biographer and longtime friend, and I and others brought her out to Los Angeles for a Serve the People conference for the Asian American movement. And she also joined Yuri Kochiyama, who passed away last year at about this time. But for the past 20 years that I've known her, Grace Lee Boggs has been such an amazing inspiration. She's a legendary activist and philosopher. She passed away on Monday morning while peacefully sleeping in the comfort of her Detroit home. She was 100 years old. She was born Grace Chin Lee in Providence, Rhode Island on June 27, 1915, 100 years ago, to Chinese immigrant parents. She grew up in New York City. Ms. Boggs received her BA from Barnard College and her PhD in philosophy from Bryn Mawr College. Her studies in philosophy, the writings of Marx, Hegel, Margaret Mead, led not to a life in academia, but rather to a lifetime of social activism, organizing, and movement building. Ms. Boggs was one of our nation's oldest human rights leaders and spent nearly her entire life actively supporting causes ranging from human rights, civil rights, and labor movements to the Black Power and Black liberation movements and feminist movements. She always had a relentless faith that revolutionary justice was just around the corner. I'll just say, knowing her for many years, she changed constantly her thinking and her activism. So revolution to her at the end of her life also meant creation of community gardens, working with youth in Detroit to rebuild their neighborhoods, and also nurturing me and many of the Asian American movement leaders of different generations. But revolutionary work to her wasn't just the militancy similar to the 60s movements, but in everyday acts of creation of a better world and to make everyone more human, as she often said. One of her books that is a treasure to me, I read it often, is written with my friend Scott Kurashige. It's called The Next American Revolution, Sustainable Activism for the 21st Century. The foreword is by Danny Glover, but it's Grace Lee Boggs with Scott Kurashige. It's an amazingly inspirational book about how to make change today. One quote from Grace that's important to me, she said, "Imagination is more than education. It is time to reimagine everything, our notions of work, food, revolution, protests, to change the institutions and to change ourselves. It is time to grow our souls and to talk about this bravely and powerfully." Grace has a lot of different sayings, but I'll just say that some of them are the most simple things that can change us for every day and what we do in our lives. It was an honor to meet her or to work with her. The Board of Supervisors paid a tribute to her also at that event several years ago. We called it Building the Next American Revolution, a celebration and tribute to Grace Boggs. And that was on March 3rd in 2012. Grace Lee Boggs went on to become an author and philosopher who planted gardens on vacant lots in Detroit, founded community organizations and political movements, marched against racism and sexism and classism, lectured widely on human rights, and wrote books on her evolving vision of a revolution in America. Her activism began in Chicago during the 40s, where she joined the movement for tenant rights, and then the Workers' Party, a splinter group of the Socialist Workers' Party. In these associations, as well as in her involvement with the 1941 March on Washington, Grace Lee Boggs focused on marginalized groups such as women and people of color. In 1953, she moved to Detroit, where she met her husband, James Boggs, an African-American auto worker, writer, and activist. Mr. Boggs was really visionary in leading the DRUM, Detroit Revolutionary Union Movement, and the League of Revolutionary Black Workers as well. Grace and Jimmy, the pair, would continue their activism efforts in their own city, which is ripe for changes due to the racial inequalities and the auto industry in its post-war heyday. Together, they focus on African Americans, women, and young people as vanguards of a social movement. Happily, Grace has rejoined Jimmy, and they both have peace. For years, they also identified closely with the Black liberation movement advocates across the country. Malcolm X stayed with them on his visits to Detroit. The Federal Bureau of Investigation was said to have monitored their activities. When arson, fires, and rioting erupted in the uprisings in Detroit in 1967, Grace Lee Boggs and Jimmy Boggs described the violence as a rebellion against rising unemployment and police brutality. Ms. Boggs eventually adopted Dr. King's nonviolent strategies, and in Detroit, which remained her base for the rest of her life, she fostered Dr. Martin Luther King's vision of a beloved community striving for racial and economic justice through non-confrontational methods. She founded, in our work in San Francisco for food justice, I'll just say Grace Lee Boggs founded food cooperatives and community groups to support the elderly. She helped to organize unemployed workers and to fight utility shutoffs. She devised tactics to combat crime, including protests outside of known crack houses, and in columns for her and wrote columns, really great columns, for her local weekly newspaper, the Michigan Citizen. In '92, she co-founded Detroit Summer with her husband, a youth program that still draws volunteers from all over the country to repair homes, paint murals, organize music festivals, and turn vacant lots into community gardens. James Boggs unfortunately died in '93, and the couple had no children. But in 2013, she opened the James and Grace Lee Boggs School, a charter elementary school. Ms. Boggs has co-authored a number of books: Revolution and Evolution in the 20th Century, Women and the Movement to Build a New America, Conversations in Maine, Exploring Our Nation's Future, Living for Change in Autobiography, and the one that I held up, The Next American Revolution, Sustainable Activism for the 21st Century. She received a number of awards, which I won't read. And for the remainder of her long 100-year life, she was exceptionally active as a community activist, like Yuri Kochiyama, another pioneer in the Asian American movement. So she devoted her life to improving the ordinary lives of people of color and immigrants and low-income people. Ms. Boggs dedicated her life to serving and advocating for the rights of others. She challenged all of us to lead in our communities or wherever we are. During the Obama campaign from 2007 and 2008, I think her famous quotes of "we are the leaders we've been waiting for" isn't about politicians being the leaders, but it's about ordinary people making change, doing extraordinary things every day. But I think it was that spirit that brought in change in the White House, and I think that's the spirit of Grace Lee Boggs. With that, I wanted to ask if there's any of the other colleagues from the board that wanted to say anything about Grace Lee Boggs for our in memoriam.
Okay, Supervisor Kim and Supervisor Campos, and just a reminder that we have 2:30 commendations, and we have members who are here to receive those commendations. So if we can move this right along, please. Supervisor Kim.
I want to thank Supervisor Marr for recognizing Grace Lee Boggs today. I think many of us, particularly in the Asian American community, have been incredibly touched by her leadership, her dedication, and being a role model for what it means to be relentlessly committed to change and community building and coalition building here in this country. She was most known for her ability to listen, being able to listen to young people, old people, conservatives, progressives, and get to see things in a whole new light. When Grace came a few years ago to Chinatown here in San Francisco, I remember her talking about how she still continued to live in the same house on the same block in Detroit. She never left the city and the neighborhood that she loved. And even when everyone moved out of her block and she was the only resident on that block in Detroit, she continued to persevere and hope for revitalization and change in her city, planting community gardens, starting youth programs. Supervisor Marr did an excellent job of listing all of Grace Lee Boggs' accomplishments. But particularly as an Asian American woman who has wanted to serve my community, I have been long inspired by both Yuri Kochiyama and Grace Lee Boggs since I discovered their existence in high school. I was in wonderment and amazement that these women existed and that they were role models not just for our community, but fought heavily both in the African American and Latino communities as well, acknowledging that change for some of us isn't enough, that change and justice must occur for all of us. I wanted to end with two of her quotes today. First, because I was born to Chinese immigrant parents and because I was born a female, I learned very quickly that the world needed changing. And finally, she stated 2 years ago in The Evolution of Grace Lee Boggs, "I don't know what the next American Revolution will be, but you might be able to imagine it if your imagination is rich enough." May we continue to honor your legacy, your life, and your work in our community through our commitment to continuing change and our commitment to hope. Rest in power, Grace Lee Boggs.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you. Rest in power indeed. I'm not going to repeat any of the things that have been said. The only thing that I would ask is if actually on both in memoriam, if we can do them on behalf of the entire board.
Okay, colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, we will do it on behalf of the entire board. Thank you, Supervisor Campos.
Thank you. The rest I'll submit.
Okay, with that, we are going to go to our 2:30 commendations, and we have 3 today. And colleagues, I will ask that you keep them within the 5-minute time period. We will start with Supervisor Weiner.
Thank you, Madam President. And colleagues, today I would like to honor someone who I know you all know very, very well, an icon here in City Hall and an iconic voice for many San Franciscans, and that is Barbara Taylor on the occasion of her retirement from KCBS. So Barbara has been the longtime San Francisco City Bureau Chief for KCBS, specializing in government and political reporting. Coming up, Barbara. For over 20 years, she also hosted the City Desk News Hour, a television program particularly popular with local politicians and City Hall insiders for its in-depth analysis on what was going on here in this building. She's also been a political columnist and op-ed columnist for The Examiner. Her radio career occurred by chance. She was working as a counselor at a residential care facility for emotionally troubled children, and after one frustrating day, realized that she needed a profession that offered instant gratification. The chat with the journalism professor resulted in a job referral to a news radio station, and the rest is history. Barbara is also a constituent in District 8, and in fact a neighbor of mine living just a few blocks away. And as I've learned from the various journalists who live in the district, and colleagues, I'm sure you can understand this as well, journalists are not shy about letting us know what some of the constituent issues are in the neighborhood, and Barbara has definitely not been shy, but she's far more often than not been right, so that's the most important thing. And Barbara, it's been a real pleasure to work with you, to be interviewed by you, with that ancient recording equipment that you have, but it always worked. And you really are someone who brought such professionalism to the job and really helped cover something that doesn't get covered enough, and that is what's happening in local government. With the changes that we've seen in the media, there's frankly not enough attention to the day-to-day work of our city government, and we know that democracy and transparency requires an active and robust local press that's holding us accountable and making sure the public knows what we're doing or what we're not doing. And so thank you for your many years of service. You're going to be missed. You're already missed, but I know we'll still see you around. So congratulations, if you'd like to say a few words.
Well, I worked for 40 years for KCBS, and I've actually never been before this microphone, so I'm a little nervous. My father was in the Navy, was a chief petty officer, and he served on the USS Hornet that's now stationed in Alameda in the Korean War. And when he came back he went to college on the GI Bill at San Diego State, where his mother had gone to school. And when it was time for my sister and I to go to college, there was no question where we were going. That's where we were going. And I thought I was going to follow in his footsteps and become a social worker and later a parole officer. And when he was a parole officer, he was still a social worker because his goal and what he did was to keep people from going back to jail. That was all he cared about. But as Scott mentioned, the career was not quite for me because I wanted more action. But he instilled in me a love of government and politics and what was going on in the world. When I was just a newbie voter, he took my mother and my sister and me down to City Hall in San Diego, and he made us all register peace and freedom because he was a lifelong Democrat, and he really believed that everyone should have a voice. And that even if he wasn't going to vote peace and freedom, he wanted them to be on the ballot because he thought people should have a say. So fast forward many years later, and I found my niche here in this building. Loving politics, loving government, having an incredible privilege of having a front row seat. And for that, I thank you all so much. I've been to thousands and thousands of these meetings. I've covered probably 100 supervisors at least. It has been a privilege, and I am so grateful to all of you. Thank you.
Congratulations again, Ms. Taylor, on your retirement. Next up is Supervisor Marr.
Thank you, colleagues. Every October, I look forward to an amazing gathering just across the bay in San Rafael. It's the Bioneers gathering, and I wanted to say that we have Executive Director of Bioneers, which is an innovative educational organization and action organization, and they highlight breakthrough solutions for restoring people on the planet. And we have the Executive Director, Joshua Fouts, who's here with us. I wanted to say that the conference has changed me. So Grace Lee Boggs talks about transformation, hearing from indigenous movements like Clayton Thomas Muller from Idle No More, Naomi Klein, whose film on the climate crisis will be out any day now, but just being exposed to some of the most amazing thinkers about a better future for this world and for communities. It's the Bioneers Conference that I look forward to for that refreshing way of looking at the world. The Marin County Conference has been going on for 26 years. It's annual. They bring together thousands of youth and community members from all over the country and world. They also dialogue and discuss practical visionary solutions for humanity's most pressing environmental social challenges. Programs on women's leadership, indigenous wisdom, or indigeneity, as Joshua's educated me on, indigenous wisdom, basically, community resilience networks and leadership development and youth. But it's an amazing gathering. I've sat with teachers in the Education for Action developing curriculum on the environment and a better world. This year's 26th annual conference takes place from October 16th through the 18th at the Marin Center in San Rafael. They cover 13 core topic tracks, including indigenous knowledge, restorative food and farming, women's leadership, human rights, and the rights of nature, green business, youth leadership, and more. Some of the key speakers include Fania Davis, Angela Davis's sister, on youth and restorative justice. She's been visionary on prison industrial complex challenging the system. Former Senator Tom Hayden on California climate leadership. I think people know he's the author of the Port Huron Statement of Students for a Democratic Society and tremendous environmental leader kind of for decades in this state. Jensen Larson on women in media, my friend Rinku Sen from Color Lines and the Center for Third World Organizing on racial justice innovations, and many, many more. Information is at http://conference.bioneers.org. Also on Monday, come out to the Richmond District to Ocean Beach on Indigenous Peoples Day, October 12th. There, the Bioneers are also sponsoring this amazing public art workshop on Ocean Beach. Marin earthscape artist Andres Amador, who creates beautiful public art in the sand of beaches in the U.S. and worldwide, will lead participants in a large-scale art practice near the south side of the Cliff House. It's from 3 to 5:30, and observers are welcome just to watch. You can watch from up near the Cliff House to watch everything happening, or on the beach, as I will probably be, after a mediation that happens. And after the event, there'll be an informal celebratory gathering at the Beach Chalet beginning at 6. I wanted to say, receiving the commendation today for Bioneers is Executive Director Joshua Fouts. He's a globally renowned media innovator and social entrepreneur known for his visionary work paving new inroads for meaningful understanding between cultures. During his 20-plus years career in international and cultural relations, Mr. Fouts has worked with the people of Malaysia, Africa, and the indigenous tribes of the Amazon, and led various intellectual projects in collaboration with governments and universities in over 20 countries on the planet. So please give us a round of applause for Mr. Fouts, and if he could come and say a few words. Joshua Fouts.
Thank you so much. I want to say that it's a personal honor to be in this room as a fifth-generation San Franciscan, but I'm really receiving it on behalf of the founders of Bioneers, Kenny Alsabel and Nina Simons, who had a vision 26 years ago to provide practical solutions for some of the most urgent paradigm-shifting issues of the day, and really the Bioneers community itself, because Bioneers is in and of itself the community of communities, a network of networks. It's a convening of people who are concerned about how do we solve some of these most daunting issues of the day, how do we create equality among the different cultures, how do we explore different solutions using science and policy. And I would like to invite you all to please join us at the conference October 16th to the 18th. And in fact, on the 15th, the Thursday before, we're having our second annual California Climate Intensive, where we've been exploring, it's a day-long exploration of how the state of California is really on the forefront of trying to address and solve some of the most daunting climate disruption issues. So we have a lot to be proud of, and our goal is to really amplify that message. So it's a real honor to be present, and I thank you all for this really wonderful commendation.
Congratulations again. Our last commendation for today will be given by Supervisor Kim.
Colleagues, it is with very heavy heart that I present this proclamation today on behalf of Mike Riegel. Mike Riegel is a San Francisco resident who was born in Lincoln, Nebraska on October 12, 1973. He took his life on September 4th of this year. This resolution and proclamation today honoring him will make his 42nd birthday Mike Riegel Day here in San Francisco. After living in Columbus, Chicago, Istanbul, Stockholm, London, and New York, Mike moved here 10 years ago in 2004, making San Francisco his permanent home. He thereafter quickly became a successful entrepreneur, founding and running an international tax consulting firm for 10 years until it was acquired last year in 2014. Mike was also an important an important part of the fabric of San Francisco. He was, for many of you who know him, a behind-the-scenes kind of guy. He dedicated his life to creating community gathering spaces. He was a founding partner in 620 Jones in the Tenderloin, a favorite spot of our community and a huge contributor back into the neighborhood. Odd Jobs in the South of Market, and the Midway, which is a new large event venue in the Bayview district. He invested so much in the neighborhoods that needed investment, and he truly believed in not just being a place of entertainment and small business, but being an integral part of giving back. Michael helped to build and lead District, a San Francisco nonprofit art and music collective with the largest daytime soundstage production at Burning Man Festival, which is quite a feat, actually, to achieve that. District has a presence in the San Francisco music scene, and it has also made artist grants and hosts many events internationally every year. Mike was deeply affected by his brother Timothy's untimely death in 1992, and he soon thereafter became involved in Make-A-Wish Foundation, which helped his brother find joy in the last year of his life. He was a beloved friend to hundreds of San Franciscans, and I do not exaggerate on that point because when his friends heard that the board would be announcing Mike Regal Day today, I got text messages from friends that I did not even know knew Mike, thanking the board for doing that. Just the countless emails and text messages that I received speaking about how much people missed him and love him and think about him tremendously really touched me. I got to know Mike not as an intimate level, but just as someone who is a mover and shaker in the community. Seeing how many lives he touched really moved me as well. This entire community, along with his family, has been deeply impacted by his untimely death by suicide in September. Mike had a lot to live for, and he had a lot to look forward to. But I think in many ways we had the most to look forward to in what Mike would give to the community. But his death also tragically highlights how common and unpredictable suicide can be. Suicide is the fourth leading cause of death for adults between 18 and 65. It greatly exceeds the rate of homicide in individuals of all races, creeds, incomes, and educational levels. There is no typical suicide victim. Suicide prevention may be a matter of a caring person with the right knowledge being available at the right place at the right time. My heart goes out to his friends and family and the many people who loved Mike. I'm incredibly sorry for his loss, and I know many of his friends are here today to accept this proclamation on his behalf. But I know more than ever we are committed to continuing the mission and service and just the heart that Mike exemplified here in the city on his behalf. And so I wanted to ask a few of his friends to come up to accept this proclamation on his family's behalf. Chris Akumu, Alex Rosenthal, and Mehdi Miranfar. I see a couple of other friends in the room too, so please come up as well. But I did want to offer you an opportunity to speak briefly on Mike.
Thank you so much, Supervisor, and to all of you, thank you for this great honor. Mike was a big, big figure in all of our lives, and we represent hundreds of San Franciscans and hundreds of folks in Nebraska and New York and London who loved him. And I'll just keep it at that. Thank you again. Chris, did you have something to say?
First, I'd like to thank you all for this honor that you're bestowing on Michael, or as we like to call him, Mikey. Mikey was a truly unique individual who epitomized what San Francisco is about. If you told me 30 years ago when I was growing up in East Africa that I was going to be in San Francisco and meet a kid from Nebraska and become good friends with him, I would have said, is Nebraska next to Botswana? But we became very close friends, and as has been pointed out, this guy was a visionary and entrepreneur, but most importantly, a most excellent friend. And I think you're being modest when you say hundreds of friends. I think Mikey had thousands of friends around the world. That's who he was. You're lucky he didn't go into politics. Thank you.
Thank you again for being here. Okay, colleagues, we will return to roll call for introductions. We basically have only gotten through Supervisor Marr. So, Madam Clerk, can you please call the next member for roll call for introductions?
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Wiener. Supervisor Yee.
Submit.
Supervisor Avalos. President Breed.
Oh, goodness. That was quick. Madam Clerk, can you redirect, please?
Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I have just one quick item. It's an ordinance that addresses the issue that while the City and County of San Francisco has had a prevailing wage ordinance that applies to some of our outside vendors, that ordinance does not currently apply to SFMTA's contract with vendors that operate the SF Access Pair Transit Program. Through SF Access, the MTA Muni provides approximately 800,000 door-to-door shared van rides per year to individuals that are unable to use Muni buses, trains, streetcars because of their disabilities. The current paratransit broker contract expires June 30th, 2016. And this gives us an opportunity to not only release a request for proposals that garners competitive bids, but that ensures workers are paid a fair and decent wage. Today, I'm introducing legislation that would authorize the SFMTA to include in its next brokered services contract provisions that require payment of prevailing wages by contractor and subcontractors for drivers, dispatchers, and reservationists providing services for the SF Access program. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Supervisor Christensen.
A couple of happy things. First, an accept and expend resolution for 5 new ambulances for our fire department, thanks to a FEMA grant. The fire department responds up to 120,000 calls per year, a lot of them medical emergencies. Our aging fleet can make that difficult to do in a safe and efficient manner. This grant will replace 5 ambulances and provide the city with new vehicles. Secondly, we have a $1.4 million Homeland Security grant for port resilience and recovery programs. I think a lot of us recall the danger that our port faced as the result of the Loma Prieta earthquake, and the value of our port facilities and our maritime fleet in responding to that crisis. And so that sort of disaster resilience and recovery programs are welcome. I'm also happy to support the issuance and sale of 2008 and 2012 Clean and Safe Neighborhood Park GO bonds. I toured the soon-to-be reopened Joe DiMaggio Playground in North Beach today with the mayor and the heads of our Library, Recreation and Park and Public Works Department. It's gorgeous. I invite everyone to the park's opening on November 14th. Joe DiMaggio is the first project funded by the 2012 Parks bonds that will be completed. These bonds are going to fund $50 million of capital improvements to neighborhood parks and other community-based initiatives. They will cover deferred maintenance. They will help modernize and enhance facilities and natural areas in Golden Gate Park, McLaren Park, and at Lake Merced. And they will fund community planning efforts for the Blue Greenway and other waterfront parks. This is good news. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Christensen. Supervisor Cohen. Submit. Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Kim, not present. Madam President.
Okay. I have a couple of items, colleagues. One of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit here in this forum is Midtown Park Apartments in my district. I know that members, individuals who live in Midtown have reached out to members of the board, and there have been a number of stories, a lot of information out there, but I want to set the record straight on Midtown Park Apartments. It was constructed in the 1960s. It's 6 buildings with 139 units of residential. It's a residential complex of 139 units, which have been historically designated for low and modern income households. And it's located by the border of Gary, Scott, O'Farrell, and Divisadero Streets. It's owned by the City and County of San Francisco under the jurisdiction of the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, and it's currently leased to Mercy Housing. The development has an estimated need of over $40 million in rehabilitation. Today, I want to reiterate my pledge to keep Midtown apartments an affordable housing complex. And I'm here to assure folks no Midtown residents will be displaced, nor have they been during this process. In the last 2 years, the Mayor's Office of Housing, Mercy Housing, and I have worked to stabilize the complex physical structure to make it safe for residents with funding from the city, including $500,000 this year alone in repairs. And over the past 9 years, the city has provided the Midtown complex with over $4.5 million in much-needed capital funds from the city's Affordable Housing Fund. My goal has always been to keep the current residents in their homes, to make rent adjustments in a fair and reasonable manner, and to provide enough rental income for Midtown to stabilize the buildings and operations. It's important to keep it affordable and protect affordable housing in my district and throughout the city. Sadly, in a city where many of our residents are paying 50% or higher of their income on housing, paying 30% is the standard in the affordable housing structure in San Francisco and is regulated by the federal government through HUD. It's important to know that the Midtown complex suffers from over 40 years of deferred maintenance caused by insufficient rental revenue and poor management. The overall income of the project is one of the causes of the building's extreme disrepair. Without restructuring the rent, disrepair will grow worse and potentially cause a loss of affordable housing units. Income certification began in March of 2014 and continued until April 17, 2015. Here are some of the findings from Midtown: that there are extremely low income and low income households which subsidize higher income households by paying well over 30% of their income in rent. Higher income households pay less than 20%, 15%, and even less than 10% of their incomes in rent. So for a breakdown, this is what's happened with those households in Midtown as a result of the work done by the Mayor's Office of Housing. 28 households will see a rent reduction. These households were paying 32 to 88% of their income for rents. Most of these residents were extremely low-income seniors who now have extra money for food and everyday expenses. 2 households will have no change in rent. 49 households will see an increase of under $100 per month for the next 5 years. And to be clear, all increases will happen over a 5-year period. These households range from 12 to 64% of AMI. 21 households will see an increase of $100 to $200 per month, again, over 5 years. 12 households will see an increase of over $200 to $300 per month in the next 5 years. And this is ultimately to get to 30% of their household income. 10 households will see an increase of $400 to $700 per month over the course of 5 years. And just to be clear, these 10 households, basically their household incomes range anywhere between 100 and 214% of AMI, which typically don't qualify for affordable housing. 7 households are going to market rate because they were either found non-compliant or were unresponsive to income certification. Unfortunately, a few people were taking advantage of affordable housing system at Midtown. We had residents that sublet their units and lived in other cities, actually making money from their units, including putting their units on Airbnb. A resident that owned a house in another city and used Midtown as their second home. I do sympathize with getting a rent increase. That's why I worked with the Mayor's Office of Housing to allow 5 years for everyone to get to 30% of their income, even for residents making well over $100,000 a year. No one will be removed from their unit or be right-sized. Residents can stay in their original unit. Since March, residents have been attending financial planning workshops conducted by Mercy Housing, and the Mayor's Office of Housing will continue to subsidize the development by providing at least $200,000 a year to cover operating costs as we work towards stabilizing the building. As the District 5 supervisor where this property is located, I'm dedicated to protecting our low-income, long-time residents with affordable, safe housing, but everyone has to pay their fair share. I have a meeting scheduled with residents of Midtown and Mercy Housing to discuss any issues. And as I have always said to anyone that lives in Midtown, my door is always open and I'm always happy to meet with them. Colleagues, besides that, I have two items to introduce. The first is a planning code change to allow marquee business signs on certain buildings in the Fillmore Neighborhood Commercial Transit District, or the NCT. This board unanimously supported my NCT legislation earlier this year, and I thank my colleagues for that. The legislation I'm introducing today will make a small change, allowing a business in buildings of 3 or more stories to display a vertical sign higher than what's currently allowed, as long as it does not interfere with architectural features or rise above residential windows, above the roof line, or about 600 feet, whichever is lowest. There are only a handful of businesses that meet this criteria. The obvious example is the Fillmore Auditorium, which is a long-time neighborhood-defining entertainment venue. This legislation will allow the auditorium to provide signage that is more appropriate for both the size and scale of its buildings, as well as its location adjacent to the Gary Expressway. In the days of urban freeways and redevelopment, the 4-lane Gary Expressway divided the Fillmore and Japantown neighborhoods in a ruthless effort to funnel as many cars through it as possible. Having large marquee venue signs along Gary will help simplify Fillmore and Japantown as more than just places to pass by, but as the cultural destinations they are. And it will help visually and symbolically bridge the gap created by the Gary Expressway. A large sign for the Fillmore Auditorium will help brand the neighborhood as the Fillmore, similar to how the Castro Theater has branded the Castro. My second item today is to introduce a drafting request. Supervisor Cohen and I will be introducing a drafting request for the city attorney and the controller to draft legislation that will create a permanent city reward fund to compensate those who provide information leading to an arrest and conviction in any unsolved murder case in San Francisco. In the past 6 years, San Francisco has averaged about 50 homicides per year. Each one is a tragedy. Each one is a loss of a son, a sister, a father, a friend. Each one never should have happened, and each one deserves every effort to bring justice. We are, according to most metrics, the wealthiest big city or little city in the country. And with that wealth comes some obligations. For everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And when it comes to the worst crimes our city faces, we should put our wealth to use, both to help the families of the victims and to get the most violent offenders off the streets. The city has at times offered rewards in specific cases, but it does so on an ad hoc basis, and there's no established fund or consistent process. This could lead to the perception that some lives are more important than others, and that is not the case. I am proposing a permanent city fund to provide rewards of up to $250,000 to anyone who brings information that leads to the arrest and conviction in an unsolved murder case. The legislation will establish specific criteria because in many cases our police department solves cases without the need for a reward. So the fund should be limited to homicide cases that have gone unsolved, in which the police have exhausted all investigative leads and for which the chief of police has, in his or her discretion, determined that public assistance and a reward is necessary. The reward fund should be subject to annual appropriations with money from previous years carrying forward, and in all this will require a small amount of taxpayer money because thankfully we're talking about a small number of cases. But in those cases, we should be doing everything we can, and in those cases, this reward can make the world of difference. San Francisco actually already has one such witness reward fund. It's in Section 640 of the Police Code, and it deals with cases of people pulling fire alarms. If we can do it for fire alarms, surely we can and should do it for unsolved murders. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Madam President. I understand that Supervisor Kim is requesting to be re-referred.
Actually, Supervisor Cohen would like to speak to my last item.
Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I do definitely hope that as we continue to formulate and develop this legislation, that we will have your support. I think it's incredible that we sit here for years and we've watched and witnessed mothers come to the chamber and sit for hours to have 2 minutes of public comment to ask, beg, and plead for our assistance. And this is a small, but I think very meaningful gesture that we can begin to help heal not only the families that have been torn by acts of violence, but bring a human touch to how we address crime in our city and in our county. I hope that once this legislation is written and finalized, that we will have full support from all 11 members on this legislation so that we can send a powerful message not only to the public, but to the mothers in particular who have suffered a great loss and who continue to suffer. And hopefully our efforts will help them to bring them, I don't want to say closure, but settle their mind and bring some peace, and so that they understand that law enforcement is working on all sides for everyone. I think it's incredibly important for us to remember that justice should swing both ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I just want to thank Supervisor Breed, President Breed, and Supervisor Cohen for their leadership on this, and would like to be a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos.
Madam President, I understand Supervisor Kim has asked to be re-referred till later in the meeting.
Okay, so with that, we will go to public comment. Madam Clerk, can you please read public comment?
At this time, the public may now address the entire Board of Supervisors for up to 2 minutes on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Board. To include items on the adoption without reference to committee calendar, items 45 through 50, public comment is not allowed on items where public comment has previously been satisfied. Pursuant to the Board's rules of order, direct your remarks to the Board as a whole, not to individual supervisors, nor to the audience. Speakers using interpretation assistance will be allowed twice the amount of time to testify. If you would like a document to be displayed on the overhead projector, please clearly state such to SFG TV and remove the document when you'd like the screen to return to live coverage of the meeting.
Thank you. First speaker, please. Come on, Mr. Yip.
Okay. 2 songs. 人生與命運原是一朝百變，成敗有如一個轉面，莫記當年，就算甘願平淡過一生，或者遲早心中有悔。有日我欲語無言，那現實何嘗改變？難拋棄夢幻，無奈講聲再見，明白到埋手怕見現實，未免可憐，讓我今後面對命共你，或者遲早心灰意冷。有日我若再回頭，笑望着人還轉變。
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, President Breed and other members of the cabal. My name is Christopher Dahl, and I live at 6th and Howard, 10 blocks and less than 14 meters from sea level. I rise to comment on symbolism, which is to say the symbolism on my shirt. In the center is the equal sign. It indicates a state of balance between one side and the other, a state of equality. The up arrow is a symbol for the carbon upload, all the carbon dioxide and methane that pour into our common air. The down arrow stands for all the carbon in the form of carbon dioxide that the plant life of our world pulls down out of our common air and sequesters in the soil and ocean. It is the carbon download of the planet. When the download equals the upload, that is balance. Also, there are two words. They can be read either as carbon balance or balance carbon. It's meaningful both ways. The silver on blue symbolizes the breakup and disappearance of the North Polar ice cap. We have been out of balance for a long time. The glacial record shows that the accumulated atmospheric carbon overload, the increase of carbon in the atmosphere minus the amount of carbon sequestered, has been going up for over 10,000 years. The way to avoid any possibility of the most dreadful and disastrous climate predictions actually happening is to balance our current carbon upload with current carbon download. All this requires is enough fresh water to irrigate enough empty desert to grow enough new trees to pull carbon out of the air permanently. If we balance out our current carbon account, Mother Nature and the world ocean will handle our historical overload. Thank you, President Breed.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Overhead.
Well, after I want to show this little short video.
Is it working?
I'm trying to see.
Okay, we'll take the next speaker and make sure it's working.
Okay.
Next speaker, please.
Madam President, Board of Supervisors, inclusive, dear Supervisor Tang, on September the 30th, an article appeared in the Examiner announcing new affordable housing legislation sponsored by yourself and Mayor Lee. As a group of 40-plus year San Francisco residents, we applaud your efforts to ensure that affordable housing for all citizens remain near the top of your list of priorities. As you are aware, longtime residents of San Francisco who reside at Midtown Park Apartments in the Western Addition are currently facing displacement from our homes. Many would qualify for the housing to be built by the year 2020 per the new legislation. Unfortunately, however, a number of families could be displaced within coming days with no place to live in this world-class city, whose promise is to keep San Francisco a city of everyone. Working-class people who range from a variety of backgrounds could find themselves among the homeless population you currently seek to house. The Board of Supervisors does not intercede. Dr. Carlton Goodlett, for whom the street on which City Hall stands is named, was once a resident of Midtown Park Apartments. It is paradoxically that the community where generations of families have lived and strived faced the immediate threat of displacement while discussions of future plans for low middle class housing is occurring. Of the 5 initiatives contained in the new legislation, number 2 relates to Midtown Park Apartments. Preservation of expiring affordable units. The mayor is working with building owners to ensure that no tenants living in units with expiring affordability restrictions are displaced. Part of this effort is to propose legislation that will strengthen the city's preservation tools. Affordable housing built today and in the future with funding from the Mayor's Office of Housing, Community Development will prohibit the kinds of agreements and contracts that allow affordability determinations after 30 years. As it relates to Midtown Park Apartment, we refer you to
Thank you very
Board
much,
of Supervisors.
sir. Thank you. I'm sorry, your time is up. Thank you.
Much.
Okay, I think.
Ms. Brown, is it ready?
Yeah, he said just click it. See, I don't have it. I'm sorry.
Is that not it?
My name is Paulette Brown, and I was asking if there's any way that you can talk to us as mothers. Homicide is going on rampantly, and I lost my son. I know you know who I am, and it's not nothing to bother you. I've been out here for the last long. Can you talk to me and not, because we've been standing outside City Hall for the longest, trying to get your attention. Mayor Edley, don't ignore us. Please talk to us. We lost our children to homicide. That's not fair. Why I'm saying that, my name is Paulette Brown, and my son was murdered August 14, 2006. I'd like to use the overhead. You know, I've been out here, I've been Mayor Willie Brown, Gavin Newsom, and now the Honorable Mayor Ed Lee. I was very embarrassed that day. I want Mayor Ed Lee to know that I'm not going to bite you. All I want to do is talk to you and let you know that the pain is still going on with mothers like myself. And we just want justice for our children. We want a venue. We want somewhere to put our pictures. We want a memorial. We want our children's pictures the same way that you're giving everybody else, Sandy Hook, Kate Steinle, and the domestic violence people, they're honored to put their pictures on the bus. Because I'm not asking this picture to be on the bus. This is all I have left of my son. This is what we have to live with every day, of our children being murdered senselessly to the streets on senseless violence. I come to, everybody knows who murdered my son. Thomas Hannibal, Paris Moffett, Andrew Vadu, Jason Thomas, Anthony Carter. They're all the perpetrators that were out there when my son was murdered. So I'm just asking for the same justice. I fight for other mothers and fathers. They also come out, and we stand outside City Hall. And it says right here, Mayor Gavin Newsom said, I know who killed her son. The DA know who killed her son. How long is the mothers going to grieve? I've been doing this for 9 years, and the pain is still the same. And no one should walk away from us. We're not going to hurt anybody. We can speak better about our own children than anyone else.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Board of Supervisors, Madam President. The Fillmore has a long history of resident displacement, and many folks who live at Midtown currently are the very people who have lost their homes to eminent domain during civic redevelopment. They were promised equity ownership and opportunity to once again have a stake in the neighborhood. Unfortunately, a decade-long work towards that goal that began in 1995 with former MO directors and culminated in 2007 with a resolution from your legislative body, has been put to a halt by the work of Mo staffer John McNamara. Now, many folks are facing gentrification for the third time due to the fourfold rent increase or a promise of evictions from the Mayor's Office of Housing. And if I may have the overhead, please. Thank you. Now, these evictions, they will commence on October 12th. Black on white, says so right there. If you do not sign a new lease under which you lose and forfeit all your rights, under which Midtown becomes a public housing development, you will be evicted. We do face the largest flight of the Western Addition residents since the bulldozers tore through our community. 10 families, 10, already pushed out, have been pushed out by the actions of Mo and Mercy. How many more have to live? Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'll keep this brief. So the board has passed Resolution 32507, ensuring that Midtown residents will eventually be given the opportunity to own their apartment complex. If this is disregarded, along with the board's disregarding of the Eastern Neighborhoods Plan, then I'm not sure how you can persuade many residents that you're taking your commitment seriously. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
I'm also here in support of the Midtown Park Apartments tenants. I'm doing a research project on their history and have learned a tremendous amount about their history, their survival of civic redevelopment. Midtown originated in 1968 as relocation housing. So I think, in a sense, they're still owed quite a bit by the city, and that doesn't seem to be forthcoming, even though in 2007 the Board of Supervisors pledged that no resident at Midtown would face displacement. Residents at Midtown are now facing displacement. Supervisor Breed said that at least 7 units are now market rate, which one could view as an effective eviction. In 2007, the Board of Supervisors also pledged that it would work with Midtown residents towards ownership. So I suppose I would like to know why it seems like we're moving in the opposite direction of ownership for Midtown residents, and where the pledge is from the Board of Supervisors to continue working with Midtown residents towards full ownership for their properties, which in my opinion they're owed over many decades of displacement. Some of these people had family members who owned Victorians that were demolished in the 1960s, and you know, the least they could have now is ownership of their apartments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Andres Estebanez, and I'm also here in support of the Midtown housing. And as has been stated, the people of Midtown, many of them were evicted already from the Fillmore and owned houses there, which now would be worth quite a bit. And now they were, after being promised the ability to own and have some manner of determination over their housing complex, that now is being lifted, even though they paid off their mortgage in 2007. That was the term it was promised to them. If they did that in 2007, there would be some movement towards ownership. And I would like to remind the people here that they have a certain duty to make good on the words that they said. These words can't just be idle. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi. I'm Richard Stone, San Francisco Green Party County Council, a 30-year resident, and here in support of the Midtown residents. And I also would like to thank Eric Marr and Jane Kim in the light of their testimonies, which without reiterating, it actually shows the pale that has been placed upon, both in terms of the activism that Eric spoke of and Jane spoke of in light of many people that I know that on Facebook just last week I had to talk down from a from a suicide attempt because he had recently become homeless himself, and just seeing something like this happen on such a massive scale when we know that other remedies can actually be done. We certainly hope that in light of of everything that is that has been happening, the promise that Supervisor Breed made today in hopes that they'll be able to further work with the Midtown residents, that I just hope that everything will be done in good faith. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Karen Smoot. I'm also here to speak in support of Midtown Park Apartments residents. I hope that all their questions will be answered and that they will get a lease that they deem as fair, given the long context of displacement in that area and, like what other speakers have said, what they're owed by the city and in the context also of San Francisco's rising displacement. I think we need to consider the many forms that displacement can take. It makes sense to talk about, paying one's fair share, but I think also we need to look at different ways that people can be displaced besides just outright eviction or Ellis Act and all the things that have gotten recent attention. We need to look at the kind of effect that this outcome will have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Madam President, my name is Juanita Clay, and I am a 25-year resident of Midtown. We want the right of ownership. And Madam President, today is the first time that we have heard that you're willing to sit down and talk to us. We're so very happy because we've been trying for at least the last 3 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, I'm Sylvia Johnson. I've been suffering without my protons. I've been going to court on this proceeding. You got bandages, so don't even fucking hold on to your fingers. And one of my hand had blistered out and escaped bled and stuff because of this new, better way of living. And I think that we need to produce more better things. And as far as my housing that I put in 2006, there's no way that they did not accept that housing. I built a good foundation, and I know that schooling and everything has been defected on me because of my eyesight. I can't see very well, and I've been going to school, and I've just got called conveniently with the care house of our health, because our health is more important than dying and all these people that are living on the streets. I think it's all a bunch of things, that, especially with the new cure, that helps cure cancer, cure all kinds of diseases. And I think this is where our objectives have been in our whole lifetime of the world. And now we need to put more study housing instead of running people out of housing and trying to get teachers and stuff. It's a ridiculous way they've been doing our society. And I think this change of cure cancer is what we need in the world, so we can go ahead and do our new ways of living and all.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
United States is only fascist terrorist country who evict 85 years old people. United States has concentration camp from New York to Los Angeles and San Francisco. Only this country. God punish this country in Obama, Lee, and this board of supervisors who didn't stop this not fair when people should to be on the street, eating from the garbage can, sleeping on the floor. How could this so rich country who spent so much money for this, God punish them?
Thank you. Okay. Next speaker, please.
My name is Otto Duffy, Madam President, Supervisors, Tenderloin Neighborhood Activist, North of Market. I do appreciate the work of Barbara Taylor. She presented her information on AM radio, a very low-tech methodology, but one that doesn't require a lot of money, gets pretty far in my community. It's low maintenance, it's environmentally friendly. About in any audio-visual presentation, about 50 to 80% of the information is transmitted by the audio signal alone. $1 trillion worth of satellites could fall out of the sky, and AM radio would still be working. And by the way, if you've been following current events, that's not an impossibility. It is a possibility, unfortunately. I appreciated what she said about her dad going to school in the GI Bill. It reminds me of, I think, something common of our generation. There was a lot of narrative that the children of the war generation had rejected their values and didn't want to go fight in a foreign war, and that there was a great rift in beliefs. But one of the things about the silver lining of the aging process is that you get to see a little more of the complexity of life. In fact, those warriors, when they came back and they got the GI Bill from Roosevelt, they created the state college system and the higher education system that we have today, that then my generation then benefited from. They were in fact the first wave of my own generation. It was much more complex than as it was presented. I think that there are pendulum swings, and I think a lot of the speakers are reflecting this one way or another. We're in the middle of a big pendulum swing right now, and I think views are changing.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Tom Gilberti, 2000. Water under the bridge. Last week here, Recology, 2 dumps per hour, but I presume the trucks are going to make a return. 4 trucks an hour, 600,000 miles extra driving. Now 2015, California, there's no water under the bridge. In the Carolinas, there's a 1,000-year flood. Climate change, climate wobbles. 5 million tons of diesel and soot and carbon we're adding. It's not the direction I think we need to go. Water under the bridge, more tons of soot and carbon. It's not where we want to go. Okay, last week, part 5 of the 5-part housing plan. We got resident condos or rental units, 30% open market rate. The next 10%, old folks matter. If you lived in your area for 30 years in a local zip code, these homes are for you. The next 15%, if you've lived in the area and you're a 20-year resident, these homes are for you. That's 25% local zip codes, 30% market rate. So we're bridling the gentrification. We're mixing and moving people in our neighborhood. Next 5%, if you've a 30-year resident in San Francisco, a zip code, that's for you. The next 10%.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
My name is Deborah Benedict. I'm a resident of 75 Dorr Street, and I'm a disabled person who recently had my service animal run over by a speeding San Francisco police car. This is a photograph here of my dog before cremation, and I have put in a submission for traffic calming treatments on my street at the top and bottom, because cars race onto it off of Howard Street and Folsom Streets. I would also, since pedestrian safety is really up, I would really love to find out how to put a flashing light in the middle of the street, because literally people are on 4-lane, one-way streets around my block, and they cut through racing all the time. People have videos of the vehicles racing, and there are children and seniors and other people living in my apartment building. Another dog was hit by a car and blinded. I don't want to hear about children or elderly people being hit and hurt at 75 Door. This officer was just dropping off someone at the number 52, the ADU, across the street from 75 Door, and there was zero reason for him to be speeding. I am bereft because of the loss of my service animal, and I would really like to improve the safety on the street where I live because danger exists every single day. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I'd like to put this commentary on the TV. It's a very excellent commentary. Matthew Henry took 40 years to write his comments on the entire Bible. There's two guys in the Old Testament that got what they wanted, you might say, and it was Solomon and Elisha. Solomon was the king, and he asked for wisdom, and Elisha was wiser than him because he asked for the double portion so he could speak for the Lord. What would you say if God said you can have what you want? You know, God asked Moses, or told Moses rather, that he was going to kill everybody in Israel and start over with him. And he did that with him instead of Elisha, because although Elisha was saved, he wasn't a type of Christ as Moses was. And Christ interceded for his people as he died on the cross for our sins. And he knew that Moses was going to ask forgiveness for Israel's sins. And so if he had asked Elijah that, for instance, he would have said, well, who's going to be my wife? And that's why he didn't ask David what he wanted, because he would have said, I want you to kill my enemies. But he asked Solomon, who asked for wisdom, and then he specifically said, because you did not ask me to kill your enemies, I'm going to give you riches, and you're going to be like no other king in all of Israel. But you know, eventually, truth is going to come out. God is a God of truth, and Jesus said, all who are of the truth hear my voice. You know, I called Ethan Behrman Saturday on KSFO 560 and asked him to interview Walter Jones, and he said, no, I don't want to do that. That's against national security. And I'm going to hope and pray that Michael Savage or Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Mark Levine, Glenn Beck over there on KNEW, and others will follow the lead of the lead talk show host, Alex Jones, who's, by the way, on my T-shirt here. If we can get a picture of this, maybe I can jump. There we go. It's a big story. I talked to Mr. Dufty about that.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you.
No other speakers? Are there any members of the public who'd like to provide public comment at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Madam Clerk, can we go back to roll call for introductions? And I recognize Supervisor Kim, please.
Thank you, President Bree. Today I am submitting two items. First is the establishing of the Warriors Event Center Community Improvement Measures Fund and Advisory Committee, also what we are entitling the Mission Bay Transportation Improvement Fund. This fund contemplates $14.1 million additional net new tax revenue generated by the proposed project of the Warriors Arena in Mission Bay beyond property taxes already committed to OCII to fund affordable housing, parks, and infrastructure in Mission Bay. What is being proposed by the Mayor's Office and my office is to establish a fund in the Comptroller's Reserve Account, which will set aside $10 million annually to ensure that we are properly mitigating for transportation impacts by the new arena, which will be joining our giant stadium. The annual operating costs the fund will be there to be available for annual operating costs to serve the arena for SFMTA, SFPD, and DPW to dramatically improve the T third service line for events, provide an additional 28 parking control officers to serve the events and to ensure traffic flow on evenings and daytime. Debt service on MTA capital improvements, including 4 additional new light rail vehicles, a newly expanded mission-based station for the Muni Metro to allow more attendees to deploy on the site, and to to reserve augment service on days with overlapping events at both the proposed arena and AT&T ballpark. Now, I want to be careful to emphasize that this proposed legislation will follow approval of the proposed project that is currently before OCII and the Board of Supervisors, a 100% privately financed project on private land. This ordinance also establishes the Mission Bay Transportation Improvement Advisory Committee with 5 seats representing stakeholders in Mission Bay, including the Warriors, UCSF, a resident, a business, and a representative of the District 6 office. I want to acknowledge the 9 other members of the Board of Supervisors who are co-sponsoring this measure: President Breed, Supervisors Campos, Christensen, Cohen, Farrell, Marr, Tang, Wiener, and Yee. I look forward to the continuing discussion on how we as a city ensure that as we bring another major arena to the city, a prospect of which I think many are excited for, that we also ensure that we are investing in the infrastructure needed to make sure that our city can handle major events and additional needs for services. My second item is in relation to a new bill that was just signed by Governor Brown and its impact here potentially in San Francisco. As many of you remember, on June 7th, 2011, this board unanimously approved the Treasure Island Disposition and Development Agreement. This project would create 8,000 units of housing. While the original deal had committed 30% of these units to housing for low-income and formerly homeless San Francisco, with the uncertainty brought forward in 2011 by the governor's call to dissolve the redevelopment agency, the Treasure Island Development Authority quickly recalibrated its structure from a redevelopment agency to a city department, and we then decreased our commitment of affordable units to 25%. In my talking points on June 7th, I made a personal commitment that if state law were to ever change, I would work to ensure that San Francisco recommit to 30% affordability goal on the island. Further, after last-minute negotiations, we were able to make 2 amendments to the DDA with the commitment of the developer. One, to increase the percentage of affordable units to 27.5%, regardless to any change in state law. And second, allowing for an increase to 30% should there be a state law change within 5 years. Supervisors Avalos, then David Hsu, Carmen Hsu, Supervisor Cohen, and Wiener joined me in supporting then Assemblyman Tom Amiano, who authored legislation AB 664 to amend state IFD law to allow Treasure Island to utilize tax increment to build up to 30% affordable housing. Ultimately, we were not successful in ensuring the inclusion of Treasure Island in AB 6664. But in recent weeks, we have had great news. On September 22nd, Governor Brown signed AB 2, authored by Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia and Assemblymember Luis Alejo, which reestablishes a redevelopment tool for cities and counties throughout the state of California. This measure allows participating local agencies, other than schools, to establish a community revitalization and investment authority to revitalize specified disadvantaged communities, including communities with crime, unemployment rate above the statewide median, and also former military bases. This measure will also address the documented lack of affordable housing by requiring that no less of 25% of these funds generated be set aside for affordable housing. This legislation will go into effect in January 2016. According to our DDA, our 5-year timeline for any change in state law is coming up 6 months later on June 2016. So in preparation of AB 2 going into effect, I'm calling upon the Treasure Island Development Authority Board of Directors and staff to explore AB 2's impact on Treasure Island and to develop recommendations to recapture the 2.5% of housing which we promised in 2011 and examine whether we can establish 40% affordable and middle-income housing on Treasure Island. I want to recognize and thank Board of Directors on TIDA, Larry Mazzola, Linda Richardson, and Jeff Kanziski, to already committing to working with our office to see if we can establish this 40% baseline. And we see Treasure Island as only the first community that will benefit this legislation. We should follow the Giants and the Port's lead of building 40% affordable and middle-income housing on public lands. And with Proposition K, which is currently on the ballot for November, requesting that any housing built on public land have a minimum of 33% affordable housing, 50% with middle income, and the precedent that we are starting to set on large projects, our office is working to ensure that 40 is the new 30. In a city where the Brookings Institution has recently found that income disparity is growing faster than in any other city, and where data from our own Human Services Agency further underscores the swiftly widening gap, with census figures showing that for every 1,000 persons over the age of 25 in San Francisco, that 7.3 are worth over $30 million, a number that outstrips wealthy urban centers like New York, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C., and where over the last 5 years, the number of San Franciscans living in poverty has increased every year, with a 5% increase in the number of residents living in poverty from 2007 to 2012. And with the wealth disparity illuminating the rapidly shrinking middle class, those that earn between 50 to 100% of San Francisco's median income, declining over 10% over the same number of years. I think we as a city need to make a stronger commitment to ensuring that we are building as much affordable and middle-income housing as possible. Public lands is one of the tools to do that, and with the recent passage of the state law, I'm directing the TIDA board and staff to see if we can establish a 40% baseline on Treasure Island. I'm also requesting that the Planning Department and Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development explore the full range of blocks and census tracts beyond Treasure Island that may also qualify from the benefits of AB2. And the rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Madam President.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, can we go to our 3 p.m. special order?
Yes, Madam President. My apologies. I just turned the page. Items 36 through 39 comprise the special order for a public hearing of persons interested in the Public Works decision dated September 18, 2014, approving a tentative map for a 2-unit new construction condominium project located at 639 Peralta Avenue.
Okay, Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I have requested that this item be continued in the past because we're waiting for resolution of the courts, and unfortunately that resolution has not occurred, and this item has been continued yet again in court. So consistent with what we've done in the past, I'd like to hereby move to continue this item to December 1st of this year. The parties will be having a case management conference that has been continued to November 18th, and with the understanding that hopefully there will be a resolution at that point. They have requested the continuance to December 1st. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Campos has made a motion to continue this until December 1st, seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Colleagues, before we take this, is there any public comment on the continuance? Seeing no public comment on the continuance, public comment is closed. Okay, colleagues, can we take the continuance? Or Madam Clerk, do we need a roll call vote for the continuance?
Madam President, I believe you can do that without objection.
Okay, so we'll take the continuance to the meeting of December 1st, 2015 without objection.
Madam President, I believe the second, I did not hear who the second was.
Supervisor Farrell.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll take that without objection. Without objection, the motion passes.
And the public hearing will be continued open, Madam President.
Yes, thank you. Okay, where are we in the agenda? We're at the end.
Immediate adoption.
Okay, so can you please read immediate adoption without reference to committee?
Yes, items 45 through 50 are being considered for adoption without committee reference. A single roll call vote may enact these items. A member may object, sever an item, and have it considered separately.
Supervisor Kim?
I'd just like to sever 46.
Okay. Supervisor Weiner?
48.
Okay. On the remaining items, Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Weiner.
Aye.
Weiner, aye. Supervisor Yee. Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Okay, those items are adopted and approved unanimously. Madam Clerk, can you please read item 46?
Item 46 is a resolution to support Planned Parenthood to urge the United States Congress to issue funding to continue funding reproductive and health care services nationwide and prioritize the approval of funding to support the continued operation of the San Francisco Health Center in the event of federal defunding.
Supervisor Kim?
Thank you. Colleagues, I just wanted to thank co-sponsors for this resolution, Supervisors Campos, Christensen, Tang, Marr, Avalos, Weiner, Yee, and Cohen. As many of you know, this has become quite an urgent issue nationally, as earlier this month, members of the U.S. House of Representatives voted to try and defund Planned Parenthood, one of the nation's largest providers of women health care and family planning services. Over the last 5 years, Republicans have also cut 10% of Title X's federal budget for family planning. And at the same time, many states have simply been cutting or eliminating family planning funds. This is simply antithetical to the idea of a society that respects women. And I hope that colleagues will join us today to send the message that here in San Francisco that we respect women and will always support a woman's right to control her own body. This resolution also affirms our city's support for Planned Parenthood, opposes any defunding of Planned Parenthood on a federal level, and also makes clear our commitment to prioritize approval of funding to support the continued operation of our San Francisco health centers in the event of federal defunding. Colleagues, I ask for your support.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Colleagues, can we take this item? Same house, same call. Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, can you please read the next item?
Item 48 is a resolution to extend by 90 days the prescribed time within which the Planning Commission may render its decision on an ordinance amending the Planning Code to prohibit accessory dwelling units from being used as short-term rentals.
Supervisor Weiner.
Thank you, Madam President. There's a typographical error in the resolve clause. It says until January 4th, 2016. That should be February 4th, 2016 for the 90 days. So I move to amend to make that change from January to February. And that is not a substantive change.
Okay, Supervisor Weiner has made a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Yee. Colleagues, can we take the amendment without objection? Without objection, the amendment passes. And on the item as amended, colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the item is adopted.
As amended.
As amended. Without objection, the item is adopted as amended unanimously. Madam Clerk.
In memoriams, Madam
Can you
President?
please read the in memoriams?
Okay. Today's meeting will be adjourned in memory of the following beloved individuals. At the suggestion of Supervisor Marr, on behalf of the entire Board of Supervisors, for Miss Audrey Carey and Mrs. Grace Lee Boggs.
Okay, Madam Clerk, is there any other business before us today?
That concludes our business for today.
Colleagues, we are adjourned. Thank you.